Welcome to part 3 of the Beginner's Guide to Bassoon Reed Making. If you haven't watched parts 1 and 2 yet, I will link them above, and you should check those out before you come here, because today we're talking all about the final finishing stages, scraping the reed to a point where you can start playing on it. I want to put another disclaimer out there that this is only one way to make the reeds, one way to scrape the reeds. The particular style I'm going to show you is Garfield style reeds. Was developed by, you can guess, Bernard Garfield, who was the principal of the Philadelphia Orchestra, and also coincidentally my teacher's teacher. So I make reeds in his style with some of my own modifications, but the structure generally stays the same. So I'm going to show you that today. You will need a knife of some sort. This is a double hollow ground knife. I'll link down to one that I'd recommend down in the video description if you don't already have one. You will need a plaque of some sort to support the reed. And the final tool you'll need for today, which is somewhat optional but strongly recommended and truly needed if you want to make reeds in my style, is a dial indicator. And I will try to link down to the one that I have in the comment section because I've had it for a number of years now and I really like it. These can be a little bit expensive. I think we're talking at least in the couple $100 range. But if you want any sort of consistency or way to measure your reeds or model them after how I make reeds or maybe even how other people make reeds, you really need some way to measure the thickness of the cane, and that's what this dial indicator does. Essentially, you put the reed on the dial indicator at different spots and it tells you how thick the reed is. This particular dial indicator is in thousandths of an inch in the imperial system of measurement. And so all of my measurements are going to be in thousandths of an inch. If you own a dial indicator already that is in metric, you will need to convert the measurements from imperial to metric. If you don't already own one of these and you want to use my reed making style, you'll want to get a dial indicator that has imperial or thousandths of an inch mapped onto it. So let's get started with a down and dirty version of the basics of the reed. So what you're looking at right here is a very basic drawing of the blade of a reed. So up here is the tip, down here is where the collar and then the wire behind that and the tube of the reed. But today we're only focused on the actual blade of the reed. And ideally, as all things in reed making, both blades should be balanced or even to each other. One blade should look like the other, and you can tell that by holding the reed up to the light and seeing the silhouette and see the darker and lighter areas of the reed. I'll talk about that more as we go on. But so that you understand what I'm talking about, this is going to be a very quick description of different parts of the reed. So the most, I would say, important and sort of structural part of the reed is the spine. And the spine, as you might imagine, kind of goes from the entire length of the reed in the center, and it's the most kind of supportive part. If you dig too deep into the spine and you're scraping, you could ruin the reed. And I say the spine runs pretty much the full length of the reed with some caveats in it. Usually when you hold the reed up to the light, you will see that the spine, there is kind of a darker area that extends all the way to the tip, but it's often very light in this last maybe half a millimeter or so to the reed. And then in this particular style, Garfield style, a hallmark of it is that there is a window in the back of the reed where the spine sort of peters out and it's lighter cane back here. That's very unique to this style. A lot of bassoon reed styles do not have that. This is kind of similar to oboe reeds. Oboe reeds often have some type of window in the back. So that's the spine. So the next part of the reed that we're going to talk about is the tip. And when I'm talking about the tip, I'm talking about these sort of triangles here. This whole area I consider the tip. And in this particular reed style, there are straight lines. We should see pretty clear triangles when you hold the reed up to the light. A lot of reed styles, it'll be more of a thumbnail or a rainbow shape and more rounded than what this is. There's just a slight difference in how the tip might look. So another part of the reed is the channels, and that is this whole kind of area, even beyond what I just circled, that is on either side of the spine. These are the channels. And in this video, I'm going to be referencing the back third of the channel, and that's often referring to this part really close to the collar. That's an area that we have to spend some time on to get it down to where we need it to go. The sides of the reeds are called rails. The very edges of the reeds, even further away from the channels. This part of the tip, the very tip, I'd say from the very edge, maybe 1/2 millimeter back or so, is the leading edge. That is where the cane should be the very thinnest on the reed, and that's very responsible for how that initial response feels on the reed. We want this to be as light as possible. This area of the reed, just a little ways behind the tip and sort of in the center spine area, but it kind of extends a little bit beyond the spine. This is the heart of the reed, and this area is really important to the reed's stability. And similar to the spine in general, the heart is really important for maintaining a certain level of resistance. And if you dig too deep with the knife in this area, you might end up with an E in the staff that sags, or your D above the staff might start to feel a little bit weak. The reed will basically lose the support it needs. And a lot of times if you go too far in this area, you've tanked the reed and it's just too far gone and it's basically dead. So in general, just be very mindful and go slow and thoughtful in this area. One more area I want to talk about is these areas where the tip bleeds into the channels. And this kind of line is known as the resistance bump, and it is responsible for often how resistant the reed feels, and it kind of goes into that heart area as well. Everything in reed making is connected. There's all these different areas of the reed that kind of are responsible for different parts of the register and do different things, but they're all connected. You can't totally isolate one area of the reed without having some effect on something else. So the resistance bump is kind of ties in with the heart as well. And I won't go specifically into the resistance bump in this video, but it is an area sometimes I will target when I'm troubleshooting a specific area of the reed. And finally, I want to go even further. This goes a step beyond where a lot of reed styles will go, and I want to define sort of this area of the reed. This area of the reed is the window, where it'll often be lighter, and that window kind of bleeds up into the channels a little bit more. And again, this is very specific to this reed style. You won't see this talked about with certain reed styles, but when you actually put the reed on the dial indicator, as you're measuring the spine back, it gradually gets thicker as you go back towards the collar, and then in this area it kind of drops off a little bit and you get a thinner area, and it'll be lighter in the light. And so this is something that we'll talk about at the very end of the scrape putting in, and that's unique to this style. This is a very basic overview of the parts of the reed. I could dive a lot deeper into which part corresponds to what type of issues you might be having, but that's probably a whole separate video in and of itself. If you're interested in diving deeper into parts of the reed, maybe I'll make a video in the future on this, so let me know down in the comments. All right, so for this style of reed making, we're gonna get really detailed into how we're actually scraping on the reed. This whole diagram is basically a blank reed log. And if you want a PDF of this, which I'd recommend having some type of reed log so you can track your reeds, I will put a link down below where you can put your name and email, and then I'll send you a PDF of this particular reed log. You can put things like the type of cane you bought, rating, any notes about how the reed feels or how it's acting. You can put measurements in here. You can get really detailed with your reeds, and this is why having the dial indicator is really helpful, because it helps you to actually make those measurements. So for this particular reed style, this little diagram up here, this is going to be the finished version, so to speak, and there's several steps to get to that finished version that I'll show you down here. A couple things to note about this diagram. Each of these numbers over here corresponds to these little tick marks that you see throughout. I know it's a little bit confusing to see, but each of these, except for the first one, are 1/8 of an inch apart. And if you have a dial indicator like mine where you have these little tick marks, you can use those measurements. So this is the starting point. This is the first tick mark, second tick mark, third tick mark, and these are each 1/8 of an inch apart. A little bit more confusing on this diagram. This first tick mark is actually halfway between the tip and the actual first tick mark. Number 1 would be like right here on the reed. That's maybe a 1/16 of an inch away from the tip, because the tip has so much power, I should say, over your response, that we define that first 1/8 of an inch up even more so we can get even a more dialed in accurate reed tip. I'm going to write out these measurements of a finished reed. So this halfway tick mark, which is number 1, is going to be 15 thousandths of an inch. Number 2 is going to be 17 thousandths of an inch. Number 3, 21 thousandths of an inch. Number 4, 24 thousandths of an inch. Number 5 is going to be 25 plus. And I'm going to write that actually for a couple of these. Number 8, I'm going to start to drop off a little bit. And this can vary reed by reed, but generally 23 thousandths of an inch or so, I start to dip down into the window area. Remember that back kind of third of the reed is a little bit lighter. This very last tick mark, if you put the reed all the way up, that's what that tick mark should be. That's usually somewhere around 20 thousandths of an inch for me, but it really depends. This is an area where you can get really specific. I've had reeds that go all the way down to like 16, 17 thousandths of an inch, and I've had reeds that I've had all the way up to 25 thousandths of an inch because that particular piece of cane seemed like it needed it. So I want to explain this 25 plus. These numbers are a little bit variable, but I find that I need them at least 25 thousandths of an inch. But I usually do not go higher than 27 thousandths of an inch. So these 3 tick marks are 25, 26, or 27 thousandths of an inch, depending on the reed. I usually leave it heavier to start and then bring it down. And then this box up here refers to how thick the corners can be. So just a note here, when you're using a dial indicator, technically you can put this dial indicator really anywhere on the reed. But the only way to get accurate, repeatable measurements is to use the spine and to make sure that you're right in the center of the reed. Keep in mind that the spine isn't just this tiny thin line. It's actually maybe, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch wide or so. This particular reed, you can see the spine it's thicker and it's a little bit more raised in the middle, and it's 1/8 of an inch wide. Sometimes you can rotate the reed a little bit either way to make sure you're getting the full spine. So yes, there's a little bit play there, but we really only measure the spine, and then you can also measure the tip here as well. And yes, you can definitely get into like the very tip versus a little bit further back. When I'm measuring, I only am really concerned about that very tip, because if I need it lower in the back, I will. So you can see actually on this reed, this is a finished reed. This reed is right around 7 thousandths of an inch, which is about where my final measurement is. So I am around 6 or 7 thousandths of an inch. Sometimes I go all the way down to 5 at the very final stages, but I would start with 7 to be safe, and then you can always take off more. And again, I'm really just focused on that very corner, but you could kind of push the reed a little bit further back to make sure that the full tip is light enough. You don't want it to be like 15 right here and then 7 right here. You want it to be like all kind of gradually leading to 7, within the thousandths of an inch or so. These are pretty much the final measurements on most of my reeds. They can vary a little bit, but it takes a while to get there. And if you're confused, don't worry. I'm going to show you how we get to this point and what all this means exactly. But I just wanted to show you what the end result should look like on a finished reed. And that's where, on this particular document, these 3 steps come in. This is not special to this particular reed style, but it often helps if you can break their scraping process up into at least a couple days. So I'm going to show you a 3-day scrape process of how to get to this finished scrape with the most success. We're going to have a first day scrape, a second day scrape, and a third day scrape. And we're going to slowly get to these measurements up here. So in this first day scrape, it's very basic. We're going to focus on just the corners, the tip of the reed. That's where we're going to scrape first. And we're just going to try to get this to 10 thousandths of an inch. We're not even going to bring these corners all the way down. And we're only going to be really focusing on the back part of the reed. I really only focus on bringing this very last measurement, number 9, all the way down to 25 thousandths of an inch. And if I bleed up a little bit into this area, I'm not too worried about it because that cane has to come off. But the first day, all I'm doing is going to take the reed down to 10 thousandths of an inch on the corners, on the tip, and get the very back, the last tick mark, down to 25 thousandths of an inch. And that's it. I'm not going to focus on any other part of the spine or anything else. Let's start there. So this is where you need the knife and a plaque. I have a whole video on how to hold the knife and how to hold the reed that I encourage you to watch. I'm not going to go into that in this video because you can go watch it there. I'll link it up above, and I talk about how and why I don't scrape with a mandrel like a lot of bassoonists do. You can definitely choose to do that here. To start with, this is a reed that I just clipped the tip. I have done nothing else. So this is exactly where we left off at the end of the part 2 video. So I'm going to insert my plaque into the reed to support it, and I'm going to start scraping. And remember, I wanted to start scraping just on the corners and then in the very back part of the spine. What I'm going to do to demonstrate this is I'm actually going to draw on my reed, and I encourage you, if you've never scraped on reeds before, to do this. I'm going to draw those corners in just like that, and I'm going to shade it in even. And this is going to remind me where on the reed I need to scrape. When the pencil marks are gone, I've done the scrape. And remember, my goal is to get these corners on this side and the opposite side. We want both sides to be even, so you have to do this twice, down to 10 thousandths of an inch. And I will check with my dial indicator here in a second. But here we go. We're going to scrape just on the corners. So I'm going to line up my knife so I can get just that area, and I'm going to start scraping. Okay, so I just removed the triangle on this side with my knife, and I'm going to just double check where I'm at on the dial indicator. So one thing you always want to double check with your dial indicator is that the needle is on 0. Sometimes it needs to be recalibrated. You'll notice that my 0 is over to the right here, and that's just because I need to go in and kind of recalibrate this. But the most important thing is that the needle is on 0. I'm going to check that corner, just on the very corner, and I'm a little bit above 10. I'm maybe around 13 or so. So I'm going to scrape a little bit more in that same area. And if you wanted to, you could redraw the triangle so that you stay in the right place. I'm not going to because I don't need to. I'm just going to scrape a little bit more in that very tip. All right, and I'm right around 10 thousandths of an inch. So I'm going to leave that alone for right now. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing on the left side. And because I'm on a different part of the reed, I'm going to have to angle my reed and my knife a little bit differently to make sure that I get just that corner and nothing else. And one thing you want to be careful of, especially on this left side, if you're right-handed like I am, if your knife comes down like that, you're going to catch more of that heart and spine area, and so you want to make sure that you're a little bit more angled. All right, I've scraped until basically my triangle is gone. I'm going to check where I'm at on the dial indicator. And I'm a little bit above 10, so I'll keep going just a little bit. A couple more scrapes, and that'll probably bring me down to about 10,000ths of an inch. Okay, let's see where I'm at. Yep, I'm right at 10. I'm gonna stop right there. I'm not gonna scrape any more on the tip today on this side. Now I'm gonna flip it over. I'm gonna draw in my triangles. And I'm gonna do the same thing. I checked, and both corners on both sides are at 10,000ths of an inch, so I'm not going to touch that anymore today. Just leave it, not until tomorrow, because we're just doing the first day scrape. And there's one more thing we do on the first day, and that is take down this back little tick mark, basically that number 9 tick mark, maybe up in the 1/8 of an inch or so from the collar. And it's okay, again, if we bleed up into here a little bit, because this cane will need to be removed anyways, but we're primarily focusing on this kind of back area here. I don't usually do this, but you can draw, just that area that you want to get, just right on that spine. And I've kind of accounted for the width of the spine is, like around 1/8 of an inch. So that's why I've drawn it that thick. So I'm going to try to remove that and get this area down to about 25,000ths of an inch. And you'll notice that I'm kind of rotating the reed as I go. So that I get the whole spine. And I've removed the pencil mark, but I know I'm going to have to go a lot further. You can see here, I'll just show you where we're at. So we are at 30,000ths of an inch. We probably started like 35,000ths of an inch or so. So we've got another 5,000ths of an inch to go. One thing you can do, especially when you're in this back third area, to prevent any sort of unevenness. Sometimes when you're scraping, you might find that there's kind of little ridges or knife marks that form. Ideally, that's not going to happen, but I find it really hard to avoid that altogether. So I would just take like a little bit of sandpaper and kind of even it out a little bit until it's smooth again. And then we're going to keep working on that area. Even it out when I start to see some knife marks coming in. All right, let's see where I'm at. I'm down to, right at about 25. I ended up there. So I'm going to leave that side just like it is for now. I'm not going to show you in this video, but I'm going to do the exact same thing on this opposite side. So there you are. There's your first day scrape. All this does is it just starts to put the tip in, and it starts to put the back window in, and that's it. Let the reed, you don't have to try to play on it. You just let it sit overnight, and then day 2 come back and we'll put some more scrapes in. All right, so we just finished day 1, so now we're ready for our second day scrape. So now today we're going to put more of these kind of finished measurements in and get it almost to where it needs to be. So for the tip, we're going to take those corners down to 7. And again, sometimes I have them down all the way to 5. So this is an area where you need to experiment what works for you. But I would start with 7. You can always take off more cane later if you feel like the tip isn't very responsive. This is where we're really going to start to put in all of these tick marks, pretty much like this finished thing here. So the first tick mark, 15. Remember, this first tick mark is a halfway mark between the tip and the first actual tick mark on the dial indicator. Again, this is in imperial. If you're in metric, you're going to have to convert these more. The third one should be 21, 24, 25 plus, 25 plus, 25 plus, and again, I usually don't go higher than 27. So if you bring all 3 of these tick marks down to 27, that's fine. Just know that you're probably, at least by the 3rd day, going to need to take them down to 25. Number 8 and number 9, I'm going to leave at 25, and then on the 3rd day, I'm going to take them down to their final measurements. But that's really for the 3rd day, because I find this is kind of the most changing area in these first 3 days. And important, this is the 2nd day. Let your reed after that first day scrape sit at least overnight before you start on this. And this is just to prevent you from over scraping and to give the reed a chance to settle in a little bit after you've made some adjustments and you're not going too far. So I'm going to begin scraping on the corners or the tip again, and I'm going to try to get them down to 7/1000 of an inch. You can absolutely draw with a pencil on your reed again if you feel like you need to. I'm not going to, because I've been doing this long enough that I can do it just from eyeballing it. And I usually do both corners and then check, but I mean, you could just do one corner at a time, as long as you're just keeping track of which corner you're on. Right. Scraped a little bit, so I'm going to see where I'm at. And depending on which part of the corner, again, this is where things get a little bit difficult. I'm around 7. Some parts of the corner it might be 8 or 6, but I'm just going to leave it for now because I can always come back and adjust this later. I'd rather leave it a little bit heavier and then come back later and fix it. So the other side, let's check. So I'm right around 7/1000 of an inch on this side as well. Maybe a touch heavier, but I'm not worried about it. So I just put these corners in. So I'm going to flip it over to the other side, and those should be at 10/1000 of an inch from yesterday, day 1. So I'm going to put in these corners for day 2 down to 7/1000 of an inch. Okay, I'm right around 7/1000 of an inch, and second one, it's maybe closer to 8, but I'm not too worried about it because I can always come back in and take that down. I'd rather leave it a little heavier and then come back later and clean that up. So now that I've got the corners in for the 2nd day scrape, here's where we really start to put the spine in. What you can do if you've never done this before is actually draw in the little tick marks. See if I can get it here. So there's the halfway tick mark, and then here is the first tick mark, second tick mark, third tick mark, fourth tick mark, fifth tick mark, oops, sixth tick mark, 7, 8th, and this again, just a reminder, this is number 9 because we split that first one in half. So you can actually mark where all of these tick marks are, so when you're scraping the spine, you're not going to be scraping over here, just to be clear, you're only scraping on this spine area. You can see approximately where you're supposed to be. So just to be clear, it should be 15 here, 17 here, 21 here, 24 here. So we're going to start to put that in, and I start with the tick marks towards the tip. It's always better to start at the tip and then work your way backward than the opposite direction, so that you don't take off too much cane. So we're going to actually start on the tip, and I usually find it kind of depends on how thick your reed is, the profile is. I profile my own reeds, and so I profile them pretty thin so that I don't have to do very much knife work, but you might need to do more scraping than I do to get it down to these measurements. So usually what I find is that I just need to do a couple scrapes just like this, and that gets me pretty close to those marks. Sometimes it goes a little far. I probably should have checked before. It's good to check where you're starting with too before you just start scraping. I just happen to know that usually I have to scrape. So let's do this first one. Oh, I'm actually a little bit higher. I'm around 17, so I need to take that halfway tick off. The second one, I'm around 19. And this third one, I'm around 23. So I need to keep scraping on these first 3 tick marks. I usually kind of do these first 3 tick marks all at once because they're very close to each other. It's hard to go 1 tick mark at a time. It's kind of easier to do like kind of multiple at a time and just be mindful of how much you're taking off. So I'm going to do a couple more scrapes just like that and see where I've landed. Oops. So now I'm down to like 17. This first tick mark is like still at 18 and 22. So I've taken maybe like a thousandth of an inch off. And you'll start to learn exactly how much scraping takes how much cane off. So go a little bit further. Okay. I'm slightly above 15, but I'm going to leave it because again, I can always come back and fix that. Okay, I've got a little bit under 17 unless I can kind of manipulate it and get it to 17. So it's very close. And then this third one, that's pretty close to 21. It's maybe like 21 and a half. So I'm going to leave that. And then here is where it might vary depending on the profile of your reed. So this fourth tick mark is all the way up at 28 thousandths of an inch. And let's see where we are going back. I'm 30, like 32, 31. Yeah. Okay, so starting on this fourth tick mark, going back, I'm going to go back like the next 3 tick marks or so. If you want to go 1 tick mark at a time, you absolutely can. You just have to be very careful that you're only in that 1 tick mark region. So this is the 4th tick mark back. I'm just going to be doing roughly these 3 tick marks. And I know I've got at least like 5 thousandths of an inch to go, so I'm going a little further because I know I have the room to go. But always go scrape less. And I'm just taking the sandpaper just to smooth it out and kind of help blend it a little bit into the other sections without taking out a ton of cane. You might use the sandpaper more than I do or less than I do. I just use it to kind of help blend things a little bit more. All right, let's see where the 4th tick mark ends up. So yeah, we're right around 24. This is right around 26. That's like 29. Okay, so this one's a little heavy still. So I'm gonna keep going on those couple tick marks back because I know those are still heavy. Those are still closer to 30 and I want them closer to 25. All right, I have a feeling I'm gonna have to keep going, but let's just see where we're at. So now, because I'm approaching the back, I kind of like to start from the back and go forward. So yeah, we're around. Okay, so that is essentially a second day scrape. I would do the corners and the spine all the way back on the other side as well. And then at this point, once you have that on both sides of the reed, this is where the reed is light enough where you can start to play it in a little bit. So you would soak up your reed, maybe let it soak for like 10 minutes or so, and then you might play for a few minutes on it. You'll probably find that it's still too resistant and that it needs more cane removed. But you might try to play a few scales on it, try to begin that breaking in process. But if it's too resistant, don't worry about it. You will fix that up in the third day scrape. But either way, leave this overnight and don't come back to it until the next day. Onto this third day scrape, we've got most of the reed down to the final measurements. And so I'm not going to recopy them here because we've already got them down for the most part, except these last two measurements, number 8 and number 9. That's where I'm going to put this to 23 and 20-ish. Like I said before, I've gone down all the way to like 16, 17 on the final reed. But let's start with these measurements first, and then you can always go further if you need to, if the reed isn't responsive. And then the final step I do is I take my little scrap of 220 grit sandpaper, and I know that I have to do this on all of my reeds, so I just do it preemptively. I take the sandpaper and pretend my hand is this flat surface, and I put the reed at a 30-degree angle, and I just pull it back just like that. But I'm going to do this on the table, so 1, 2, 3. I'm not sure how well this is coming up on camera, but that took off that very leading edge. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side, 3 scrapes, and I'm not sure if you can see, but it took off that very leading edge of the reed. And I just know preemptively that I have to do that on all my reeds to get the tip to speak, and so I just do it right from the beginning. So from there, assuming you've put in the back third measurements, you've done those couple little things to the tip, now is where you can soak the reed up and really start to break it in. It is not fully ready yet. It often needs a little bit more after this, but you need to start breaking it in before you get it down to the final scrapes. And what happens, usually I will play on the reed a couple days like this, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 days to really let the reed adjust to its environment. I find if I scrape too much too quickly, it kills the reed before it has a chance to be really settled. What I often find in those first couple days is I have to scrape in this back third, on the back third of the channel, and that's where I start to put the window in. Truthfully, I don't put the window in until probably the 4th or 5th day fully, because remember, the window is the back part of the spine, but it kind of bleeds up into the corners. And just like what I was doing with the spine, I'm gonna take a little piece of my sandpaper and just help everything kind of blend together. And that's the area that I find on my particular reeds and this style, it takes a few days for that to go in. And it just takes time and experience to figure out how much, and every piece of cane is different. So some pieces of cane, some reeds, you won't need to make a single scrape on that back third. It'll feel like perfect after that 3rd day. Some reeds will feel perfect on the 3rd day, and then they'll start to harden up on the 4th or 5th days after you start to put some hours of playtime on. Some reeds, they'll feel like you're playing like on a 2x4 on that 3rd day scrape, and you might need to put that back third in on both sides as you do everything else right away just to be able to play on it. So this is where things can get really varied. I just want to say a couple more things to make sure that you're getting the most out of your reed scraping. So There are always some more adjustments that you can make. If you start breaking the reed in, you may need to scrape more on the tip. You may need to play with some of your spine adjustments, and especially as you're figuring out your measurements, that's going to take some time and you're going to ruin some reeds. That's the whole point of this reed log, is so that you can track what measurements work for you. Your measurements may look totally different from mine, and that's totally okay. This is where working with a teacher is really important, because there's fine-tuning and micro adjustments that can happen at this stage in the reed's life, even after breaking it in. You can get the reed working okay, but in terms of making it feel really great and getting to do what you want it to do, and making a reed for particular situations. If you're trying to make a reed that's playing the rite of spring, there's going to be a different approach to this process than if you're making a reed that can play the opening of Tchaik 6, low note reed. A lot of different things going on here, but this is very much the beginner's guide to reed making if you want to start making reeds the way that I do. On that note, to make sure that you're getting your reed to look and feel and sound the way that it should, you might consider purchasing some of my reeds. The process that I've shown you in these videos is exactly the same that I use for reed orders. And so you can purchase one of my reeds and use it as a template to understand what it's supposed to look like, and you can put my reed on the dial indicator to see what I did with it to get it working, and you can compare it to your own reed. So I'll throw a link down in the description where you can purchase my reeds if you want to check that out. I do the best I can to put as much information in these YouTube videos, but there's only so much I can give you that's sort of a one-size-fits-all approach. The steps that happen after this in terms of fine-tuning, micro adjustments, troubleshooting what's going on with a particular reed, that has to happen in a one-on-one private lesson, because your instrument, your setup, your tools are all going to be different person to person. So if you're struggling with making reeds, or you want to learn more about this, you want to play reeds or play your reeds or show your reeds to me, I'll put a link down in the video description where you can sign up for a lesson with me, and we can do exactly this. I can have my camera set up like this so you can see what I'm doing, and I can try to diagnose what's going on with your reeds in an individual setting. I hope this video was helpful for you. If it was, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and let me know any questions that you have down in the comments. I'm sure there are questions from this video. This was very much a beginner's guide, and there's always specific scenarios that it's hard to cover everything in one video. So best of luck with your reed making. Reach out to me if you're having trouble and want to set up a lesson, and I'll see you in the next one.